Hello friends, this is Jim with Science Talk. I want to share with you a disturbing study and some disturbing projections. This is a paper that's published in the Journal of Global Change Biology. It's a research team led by St. Technelia, and the main author of the paper is one Guillaume Chust. He was also the leader of the scientific work. And this is part of the European MEIS project. And basically what they were looking at is what's going to happen to the phytoplankton and the zooplankton. And they are estimating that as the ocean temperatures continue to warm, that the phytoplankton and the zooplankton biomass may decrease by as much as 6% and 11% respectively. And that's projected by the end of the century. Now, if you have a lower amount of the phytos and the zoops, we call them zooplankton zoops, this is going to have major implications for the marine food web. And with the result that fish biomass may be drastically reduced, certainly in certain regions. And of course, a lot of people do depend on obtaining their protein from the ocean, and particularly in harvesting fish. So this is disturbing. Sea surface temperature is expected to increase 2 degrees C. That's sea surface temperature, SST. 2 degrees C on average globally by towards the end of this century, the latter 20 years. Now, we've already increased the air temperature 1.3 C since over the last 170 years or so. 2 degrees in the water. Remember what I said about specific heat? That is a lot of energy. This is significant. So, I've already discussed with you that what can happen is that ocean circulation can be affected, deep water formation, particulate surface flows as well. You can get a stratification higher up in the water column. Yes, there's a seasonal stratification, and there's a permanent pycnocline at depth. But we're talking in the upper 200 meters or so. You're going to have more persistent stratification, which then will affect the nutrients that are available for the phytoplanktons, and not to also mention the acidification issues. So I'll get back more to the stratification issue in a moment, and you've heard me discuss that before, but it's worth going over that again. So what they looked at in this research, they looked at the primary production. Now, primary production is basically the biomass that phytoplanktons create as a result of their photosynthetic activities. Okay. And then secondary production is how much zooplankton biomass is created. So when zooplanktons feed on the phytoplankton, they're able to put energy into their eggs' reproduction, and they make more zooplankton. And then the zooplankton, of course, feed the fish, the small fish to feed on the zoops, and then fish to feed on those first fish, and then another group of fish feeding on the second group, and so on. So if we start seeing significant declines in the biomass of the phytos and the zoops, that's going to have reverberations and ramifications throughout the food chain, food web. So this example of increasing sea surface temperature illustrates what's called as negative amplification of climate change, meaning that it will spread throughout the marine food web. The zooplankton biomass will decrease more than the phytoplankton biomass. This will typically take place in tropical oceans. Tropical oceans cover 47% of the global ocean surface. Now, there will be differences by region. Phytoplankton and zooplankton reduction will affect different regions in different ways. In the seas of Central and Southern Europe, North Sea and temperate Northeast Atlantic, higher thermal stratification of the ocean water layers and Consequently, a lower presence of nutrients for phytoplankton to grow will reduce primary production. In the Baltic, Barents, and Black Sea, phytoplankton production is expected to increase. So, going back to Dr. Gilliam Troost, he says that in the ocean regions that lose more phytoplankton and zooplankton biomass, that is, with a negative amplification, fish biomass may also decrease dramatically, especially pelagic species. Pelagic species are fish that live in the open water column, as opposed to benthic that are on the substrate. Technically in the substrate, epibenthic will be on the substrate, and then you have demersal fish and so forth. But the pelagic are fish that live in the open ocean. He goes on to say, continue saying, climate regulation will also be affected negatively by the primary and secondary production decrease globally. Because as there will be less phytoplankton, absorption of CO2 from the atmosphere by the oceans will be lower. As plankton is responsible for half of the planet's photosynthetic activity, this in turn will reduce the ocean's capacity to regulate the climate. In other words, regulate how much CO2 it draws down. So when you have increased temperatures, okay, you're going to increase the likelihood of stratification. Remember, for productivity to take place, you need two main events. You need some sort of a vertical mixing regime to mix in all the nutrients up into the photic zone, followed by a stratification, a seasonal stratification. And then the phytoplankton are locked into the photic zone, but the nutrients are there that they need, and they can do their thing. If you start having this persistent thermal stratification, and remember that's also technically it's the stratification of density, but if you start having a more persistent stratification, you're not going to get the nutrients into the photic zone. And then the phytoplankton are not going to be able to increase their biomass, not going to be able to do their thing. But also keep in mind, warmer waters means there's less dissolved oxygen. So the concentration of oxygen decreases. This is not good for organisms that need oxygen, like fish. Okay. That will also contribute to their decline as well. So the warming waters will increase the likelihood of stratification, will decrease primary productivity, which will then reverberate throughout the food chain. So another alarming study of what's going on in the ocean and on our planet. So, thank you for your time. We'll talk soon. Hey folks, this is Jim here reminding you to subscribe to this channel, to share my videos, tell others of the work that I do here. I also ask that if you are not already a patron at Patreon, to please consider becoming a patron at Patreon. You can find the information in the description box below the video. I'm asking you to help support the work that I do. I do not take any money from corporations or from any other sources, so the information I share with you is the actual science as it comes out of the peer-reviewed journals. So there is no BS, there's no propaganda, there's no agenda. It's just I present the science and I explain to you what it means, or at least my interpretations of it, based on my own experience as a scientist. I want this channel to grow. I consider, while I discuss many different topics here, you notice I do focus a lot on climate issues. I consider climate change to be the most pressing issue facing humanity today. Thus, I consider it important to disseminate this information to a wider and wider, more and more people. And I need your help to do this. So Yes, please subscribe. Please tell others of the work that I do here. Please share my videos on social media platforms, with your social media groups, what have you. We need to get this information out there. So for those of you who are supporting me on Patreon, I thank you greatly for your support and continued support. It does mean a lot to me. So together we can get this information to more and more people. Thank you. Thank you for your support.